After Melani Boudreaux Pawlowski's husband, Brandon Boudreaux, was shot at, she moves to Idaho with her uncle Alex Cox and her aunt Lori Vallow. Investigators have speculated several reasons for her doing this. One, she believed that Idaho was going to sponsor and build the City of Light and the Church of the Firstborn, the cult she denied she was in. Secondly, she moved after her husband Brandon was shot at and supposedly shot at by her family member, her uncle Alex Cox. Based off strong evidence, they believe that Alex Cox drove Tylee and Charles' Jeep from Idaho to Arizona, where Brandon lived. He then sat in front of Brandon's home, waited on him, shot at Brandon while he was inside his vehicle. Alex Cox missed by inches. While investigators believe that Alex Cox is the guy that was shooting at Brandon, they believe that Lori Vallow, his sister, was the mastermind. Investigators also discovered, based off of this GPS information, Alex Cox had visited his niece, Melanie Boudreaux, the ex-wife of Brandon. That visitation, well, at least going in front of her house, was just before Brandon was attacked. So something that stands out is the fact that Melanie got a lot of money from the divorce. Brandon Boudreaux had his hands in a few businesses he had started, and he actually had given Melanie what she said was her part, her portions of some of those companies. She got a few portions from that, including money from when they sold their family home. We heard rumors as to why Ian ended up divorced, and a few of those speculations and rumors are the fact that his wife got tired of his laziness. So here he is walking into a relationship with a woman that has a big chunk of money. She's actually giving him attention and has accepted him for who he is. Before this, when Melanie was in this marriage with Brandon Boudreaux, she stayed at home. She didn't work, and her full-time job was to raise her children, and they had a lot of children together, which was a lot like Lori. At the beginning of the investigation for Brandon Boudreaux, Melanie Boudreaux was a person of interest, later was called an investigative lead. During 2019 through 2025, there were no charges for Melanie Boudreaux for this attempted shooting on Brandon. Believe it or not, guys, you can pull up documents that say, according to this information, both attorneys from both sides confirmed that Melanie wasn't facing any charges. And Melanie, of course, denied having anything to do with Brandon Boudreaux's shooting. If you follow this case, most of you know this. Melanie was called to be a witness for two trials. One for Lori Vallow, in which she didn't testify. And her reasoning for not testifying is that she told the court and attorneys that she listened to Ian's testimony at Lori's trial. How convenient, she wouldn't have to testify or face her aunt to be truthful. Why would she be afraid to testify at Lori's trial, especially after she said she was waiting for the truth to come out? And, once that truth come out, she would know what to do. But she never, not once, stood up for any of these victims, not one of them. Again, why is she not standing up for the victims? Why isn't she doing the right thing? And why isn't she testifying to what she knows? Anyways, a lot of people believe her listening to Ian's testimony was a way to get out of testifying. And it really got to me because she wasn't concerned at all about testifying for the victims. She knew good and darn well she was not supposed to watch any footage from the trial. And you got to remember, two of her own cousins, they were brutally murdered by who? Her uncle Alex, her aunt Lori, and Lori's lover, at the time anyways, Chad Daybell. You got to remember Ian, his role early on when this case is really heating up, and he's finding out information that seems concerning, but you have to wonder, did he already know some of this beforehand, before Natalie, his ex-wife, starts reaching out to him? At one point, Ian says he is concerned about Melanie and this group of people, and so he records telephone conversations with several members of this group, trying to get any information he could, supposedly. Now, if Brandon had died, his insurance money would have been used to support this group slash cult. At least that's what the rumors are. And we know that Alex Cox was accused of trying to take Brandon's life, and Melanie was spending a lot of time with her uncle Alex, and together they were trying to actually hunt down Brandon Boudreaux. But she didn't say that in court. She wouldn't admit to that. She claimed she was looking for her children. Again, she says, because Brandon maliciously, basically is how she makes it look, took her children away from her for no reason. It wouldn't be the fact that he was driving home to be shot at what looked like from a Jeep he was familiar with that belonged to the Cox family, with Alex Cox being the shooter. Again, the lack of recognizing the attack on Brandon Boudreaux and how devastating that is for him and the children is a key thing to remember when we talk about Melani Boudreaux Pawlowski. Just like her aunts Lori Vallow, whatever they say, just apply opposite day. Nothing that comes out of their mouth seems to be truthful, ever. Let's not forget that Brandon had to hire an investigator to keep an eye on his ex-wife or estranged wife after he was attacked. It really seemed to me that Melanie Boudreaux had become quite greedy, manipulative, a monster that almost mimicked Lori to a T. She was aggressive in collecting money from the divorce. She was living a carefree, comfortable lifestyle, but claimed Brandon Boudreaux was making her life hard. You know what else? There's an overwhelming amount of evidence that says that Brandon was always trying to treat her fairly. He wasn't making it difficult for her to collect her money. He wasn't doing any of these things. The only thing Brandon Boudreaux was doing was, after he was shot at, trying to warn people and trying to figure out where she was, because he wanted to keep his eye on her. And can you blame him? And even after all of that, Melanie continued to torture Brandon with lies and false accusations. She sent cult members to look for him. People like Melanie Gibb knocking on his door. Melanie even followed Brandon to his parents' house, where he was trying to hide for his safety, keep his kids safe. And she trespassed on the family's property. She was persistent in trying to destroy Brandon Boudreaux, it seemed, and by smearing his name, character. And she did this relentlessly and maliciously to push a narrative that he was gay, that he was unfaithful. And you go back and you think, why did Melanie Boudreaux, who seemed to have a great, perfect marriage and a perfect family, suddenly attack his character? And what was her motive? And if you research this, you will go back every time and notice that anything she has done thus far mirrored her Aunt Lori exactly. And here's what we know. We know that both Lori and Melanie Boudreaux, their husbands at the time, worked in insurance. Both husbands went out of town to work. Both make decent money. Both victims of a murder plot. Both had a connection to Lori. Both had life insurance, guys. Sorry, guys. $1 million worth. Both men were willing to do whatever they needed to do to save the marriage. Both Melanie and Lori together both try to say that Brandon and Charles tried to take their temple recommends away. Both Charles and Brandon were deemed zombies by this group of people. Both women wanted to actually slow down the divorce near the end of the divorce. Both women managed to keep their hands in the financial parts of the marriage, although it was failing. Both seemed to use their children as a way to gain empathy and support. Both women appeared to say or believe that they loved their families. Both women were determined to paint their victims in dark light. Both women spent hours and days in the temple seeking answers. Both women took part in the castings of the victims deemed zombies. Both women moved to Rexburg. Both have close relationships with Alex Cox. Both lied without remorse, and both had no concerns for the pain they caused anyone in their life. Does it sound like we're at our end? No, hang on. Both were supporting becoming translated beings. Both trusted Chad's idea that Rexburg was the safe place to be during the apocalypse. Both women seduced men and pulled them into the religious world and had their full support. Both of these women would lie without blinking. Both claimed to love their children, yet they're the reasons their children are suffering. They're creating chaos all around them. Both had zero care of the destruction they caused. If we refer back to the documents Ian Pawlowski and read over his statements, you would notice that he was well aware of what he was getting himself into and his children. You mustn't forget that one story he told where after they got married that night, he said he and Melanie and a few of his children were at a hotel. He became incredibly frightened. He couldn't find one of his kids. It took him a while to finally locate his child. It was clear when he shared the story with us in an interview, he had legitimate fear. If he didn't know anything, then where did this sudden fear come from? Because around November 29th through the 30th, a few days after police actually performed a welfare check on JJ and Tylee. In another interview, he claimed he had never met Tylee or JJ. So why was he scared about his child? Was it because something Melani Boudreaux told him? Ian supposedly had no idea the kids were deceased or missing for that matter. Did he understand zombies? Did he know what zombies were? Melanie was sharing her visions with him. There's no doubt about that. She later pushed off those visions as a dream or nightmares. And she was sharing these visions with Ian. And Ian was actually took them as visions because later on he had to recant what he told the FBI, that his wife was having bad visions or dreams. And Melanie is sitting right beside him while he's recanting this, and they're supporting this line. So that takes a lot of galls. Melanie, no doubt, was following some of these teachings, but refused to admit she was. And the fact that she and Ian both lied on national TV, and it was very obvious, recanting all the information of Melanie having those visions or even being part of this religious group, is quite concerning. A lot of people are wondering, why is it that Melani Boudreaux Pawlowski is still on the streets? My question is, why are both Ian Pawlowski and Melanie both running the streets? Ian Pawlowski was working with the FBI, but he changed his mind. Instead, he ended up writing his attorney and Melanie's attorney on what he told police so that they could fix the problems or whatever he said to the FBI and turn it into, in my opinion, what he wanted it to. He mentioned the fact that they had been married faster than any sane couple would, but we both felt it was right. The fact that he's using felt may be an important keyword. On their wedding night, she began to elaborate on ideas she shared earlier about her children coming to her. Now, guys, this is one of the things that was manipulated because at first, Ian said that these children were coming. She was getting visions in a dream about the children, those being like visions from heaven. Then they changed it to nightmares. The original belief was they were getting visions. Melanie explained zombies and her fears about Chad and Lori. Those statements actually concerning the original spirits being caught in limbo until the body's death. So we know that Charles was a zombie. He died. Tylee and JJ are zombies. They're gone. Tammy Daybell was a zombie. She's dead. Ian's hopping around all over the place. He also stated that she stated that Brandon had been possessed by a demon or another dark entity the same time after June of this year. She was told through revelation or by Chad that something would happen to him, that something needed to happen to him in order for his spirit to progress and for the Lord's plan to continue. So they're saying right now that this religion has a lot to do with what they're planning, all of these deaths, the zombies, the possessions, and knowing just from this little bit that Ian's actually clipping out a lot, that there's a lot in between the lines there missing that he knows. I absolutely feel he knows a lot more. Just based off of that little bit of evidence, he and she, Melani Boudreaux Pawlowski, understand what this group is teaching. And just based off, I can't imagine what the FBI, what they have on Ian. But just based on this letter to Melanie's attorney, he's incriminated himself and Melanie. At least he's showing that he's a liar. He doesn't seem to care about the safety of his children. He says he does, but I don't think so. He doesn't seem to care about the safety of his family. His goal is to help Melanie get out of this mess. And how can he do this? And the only way that he can do this is to beg, plead, and manipulate. Because he admits he was working with police, but then he decides he no longer wants to work with police. Why doesn't he want to work with police? Well, he's saying that he feels like they're threatening him and manipulating him, basically. And why are they there in the first place? Well, they're concerned about the safety of 2 children. They're concerned about a man whose life was threatened, Brandon Boudreaux, who was shot at, and they nearly missed. What are Ian and Melanie Pawlowski's concerns? Well, it's not them. Remember when Melanie Boudreaux did that interview and Nate asked her about, the shooting of her ex-husband? In those interviews, she says, Brandon knows I wouldn't do that. Do you also remember when she said, she asked Alex, did you have something to do with this? How she didn't think they had anything to do with it. But in documents, that's not exactly how that went. According to Ian, she absolutely did know and suspect that Lori and her uncle, Alex Cox, who she loved and enjoyed hanging out with, even after he died, she didn't have any more threats to worry about. They were innocent. These documents and they didn't incriminate have them anything to do with very that. Much. It says that she shared, saying Melanie, the idea that Chad and Lori could have directed Al to take the shot of Brandon. Same breath, Ian says it's something that she didn't seem very sure about. He even tried to place a lot of the blame on Chad Daybell, though he didn't hear any of these little accusations of Chad come from his mouth. He also admits in these documents that both Chad and Lori told Melanie that her children were possessed and had become zombies. Then he switches to the fact that she had been told that Brandon needed to die. And to her, back then, at least around the end of November, she understood the fact that this meant that the kids, being a zombie, may have to die as well. Melanie kind of says something that seems more like a threat to me, but that's my opinion. She tells Ian that her Uncle Al had great faith. That trust never wavered in the Lord. This is after he writes that she said she is afraid that Al had to take care of the kids. In this document, he also shows his concern. He says at that point he became severely worried, that he told himself that there was no way that he just married into something so sinister. He says he spent the next 2 days trying to justify his actions and reassure himself that everything was fine. But he couldn't get to that point. Why couldn't he get to that point? Well, his ex-wife, Natalie, had been asking him questions, asking about Melanie's name. You got to remember that Brandon Boudreaux had contacted Ian's ex-wife, Natalie. Natalie had been speaking with Ian's mother. Brandon's trying to warn this family. They're trying to warn Ian, and Ian is fighting them every step of the way. So Natalie's trying to do some research, it sounds like, on Melanie. Go through social media, find out who she is, what kind of girl she is. She seems to be worried about Ian and her children's well-being, especially being around this group of people. So he says one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and he says he doesn't share Melanie's full name because he was worried about the fact, or feared, that Brandon may use it to try to find her and harass her. So here he is helping Melanie spread the word instead of, investigating what his ex-wife is telling him. He's already showing this defensive trait that he's going to support her no matter what. Remember, Melanie had been telling people that Brandon was the one harassing her, but we don't see a case open anywhere that suggests such a thing. Ian said that he was adamant that he not share his new wife's full name with anyone. He claimed that eventually he couldn't justify any of that and gave Natalie, his ex-wife, Melanie's full name. That doesn't make sense anyways, because if Natalie needed her full name and had contact with Brandon, she could get it there. According to Ian, he says it was around December 2nd, just a few days after he got married to her, that his mother had reached out to him. That is when she got off the phone with Natalie, and that is when Natalie started to reach out to her ex-husband, Ian. Now, he says something quite interesting here, that Natalie made it a point to cut herself off from his entire family, and that she hadn't spoken with any of them for at least 8 months. He admits Natalie was terrified for him, and especially knowing what happened to Brandon. But I can see why they probably got a divorce here, because he doesn't listen to her. He doesn't take her seriously. He could care less. Instead, he continues this path that's not good for him or his family, and shuns away the only person that really and truly cared for him at one point. Instead, he chooses to be with a woman that is being investigated for a possible shooting of her ex-husband. At one point, it sounds like he might have been terrified about that possibility, that, how crazy this family sounds. But at some point, he's able to figure out or talk himself out of, thinking in that way and accepting that he believed that she had nothing to do with this. Here's something Natalie was talking to Ian about during this time, and that was, the situation that he had brought everyone into, including his own children. Natalie wanted to talk to him on how to keep their children safe. Natalie also tells them that she's going to go to police. Strangely, Ian says he's going to go to the police as well. He seems to say that, at first he's not sure what to think about the entire thing. He wants to go in order to, talk with police and consider the fact that Melanie may not be who she claims to be, and that he wanted to keep himself and his family out of a dangerous situation. And then already he has a second idea. And that second idea is that Melanie has been taken advantage of. And I'm going to get her out of this messy situation. That is key. Ian wanted what he wanted, in my opinion. And his main goal was not his family that was in danger, but to kind of be in between the lines and get both takes on the case so that he can manipulate the situation and get what he wanted. And we'll talk more about this later, because he said he went into this meeting with police and he intended to share things as he understood it. But later on, the stuff that he shared, he would claim was taken out of context. So right now, let's go ahead and share some subscriber comments. And I have so many of them. Usually I want to put more comments than I have, but I haven't been able to in these videos. So we might have to do just a subscriber video later. But trust me, we're going to talk more about Ian and Melanie, but mostly Ian for the next video, because he is very sketchy. A lot of people almost felt sorry for Ian, including myself, until you had time to sit down, rest, and let everything marinate and soak in. And when you compare his words to his documents, to his interviews, you'll find that he would do anything, including deceive, to help Melanie. That's based off of my research and my understanding of the case. And I'm very much study Ian Pawlowski the past few months. So guys, share your thoughts. What do you think Ian's intentions are? Did he intend on keeping his family safe ever? Did he care about everyone except himself? Why did he want to protect Melanie so much? We learned that many people did figure out what zombies were eventually, and they had suspicions of what was happening to them. In this comment, Diane says, Melanie P. knew exactly what Chad and Lori meant when they said someone was dark. She can play dumb all she wants, but she's sly like a fox. I'll never understand Ian Pawlowski staying with Melanie, knowing all he knows now. I hope she will soon be arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. Thank you, Diane, so much for sharing. And we absolutely, I think the majority of us totally agree 100%. What was Ian thinking? I mean, there's so much out there that says, don't do it, Ian. These people are out there. What are you thinking? And, he just continues to go on, even convinces his wife he's going to help her. But in my thoughts on that is, when he went to the police station with Natalie, it wasn't to really help the police or anyone else for that matter. It was to be a spy. Okay, here's Barb's, and she has an interesting take on him. Melanie will never be accused because her ex-husband doesn't want to destroy his kids knowing their mom could have murdered them. He wants to keep everything the same as it was before. Lori infiltrated that family with her narcissistic need to be God. Barb, that is interesting when you consider the fact how he mentions that forgiving these people is so important to him. So is Brandon Boudreaux in support of Melanie paying for her bad choices? Or will he continue to defend her and wish her to, continue life without any consequences? That is a great question. And I can't even guess that, because I think it could go either way. So this next question our statement is from Darla, and she's referring to the fact that when Brandon was shot at, only a handful of people knew his address, one of them being Melanie. She says Melanie is the only one that knew her ex-husband's new address. And that's something investigators and police immediately keyed in on, because Brandon made that very known that no one knew his new address. All this was kind of happening really fast, and he really hadn't had time to even communicate his address with anyone. So next up is Clarissa. Hey girl. So she's going to share her idea of what a lot of people have said about the Cox family. So the Cox family is completely dysfunctional. I saw that interview with the mother and Summer. Pretty sure Summer is still supporting Lori. I love my sister, but if she killed her kids, I would have nothing to do with her. She showed up to support Lori at her sentencing. Lori's mother replaced her lost infant with Lori. Lori grew up thinking she was Lolly. Imagine the damage that does to a child and a young woman. No excuses for Lori. She knew exactly what she was doing when she killed those people. Family dysfunction can go on for generations. Parents can and do ruin their kids' lives forever. The cycle rarely ends until someone realizes there is something wrong and seeks help. Janice is responsible for what Lori has done. Her father is a nutcase as well. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Clarissa, for sharing. It's so much in this that we probably would have to do a video in itself just to discuss this comment. Definitely, they had some family dysfunction, like many families do, and they do go on for generations. The thing is a lot of families don't even realize that what they believe they're living is not probably the best way of living. And for them, especially those that are narcissistic, they're going to be blind to anyone suggesting otherwise. And it does seem to be quite a narcissistic family. Not saying that's a rare thing, because it's American families for you. But I think the most interesting part of this comment is where you mentioned Summer and her true intentions. I never believed, in my opinion, Summer to be a good person at all. She doesn't understand just how seriously dangerous Lori Vallow is, and their whole family has kind of worked together over the years during different events, if you want to call it that, to kind of gossip, support Lori, to shun others, and I'm pretty sure there's more to it than what we're hearing. And I believe there's a long history to that, and I just never trusted Summer, ever. Can she have a good heart? I guess so. Does she want to have a good heart? I think so. But she's so blinded by her denials and narcissism that, to me, in my opinion, that has kept her from seeing the truth, healing, and moving forward. Listen, my sister hasn't even killed anybody, and I could cut her off, and I haven't talked to her in 10 years. I mean, if you don't have good moral values, you want to continue to cause problems, why do you want someone like that in your life? If my sisters, either one of them, have murdered someone, and I knew something, I'd be helping dig their grave. It's just that simple. I would do it for my children. It's a moral thing. And a lot of people don't seem to have that today. Well, guys, I'm already at 34 minutes. I'm going to have to cut this down. It takes me hours to upload just to cut it short. But I absolutely adore you guys. I appreciate all your comments. And I have so many of them. I have them snapshotted. I just got to get them out there. And I appreciate it so much. Please take a moment to like. That is the biggest thing you can really do for me. And share, subscribe, and then also share our missing girls, their cases that are cold and stumped. Their families need answers. Love you guys.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys soon.